Good evening, good afternoon, whenever you are watching this. Thank you for coming back to the channel. Thank you for showing up, as it were. My name is Aaron Jones, and I'm AJ97, the one pursuing purpose. And I just wanted to have a quick video just talking about something that's been on my mind a little bit, something that kind of came to me as I was studying a little bit, just that I think is really interesting and that we kind of downplay a little bit in daily life. But I want to talk about names. The things that identify us. So when I was studying, I was kind of thinking about, the significance of the names in the Bible. All the names are kind of descriptive. The names of the characters kind of lead into what they're going to do in life. Ultimately, it kind of describes the kind of walk and what they do. And then I thought about my own name. And in studying some more about names, I realized that names are extremely significant. Before I go into any more about names, let's get a little bit of history in here. Academic materials and sources such as namestories.com and heraldry.sca.org document the origins of names to as far back as oral history reaches. People, as far as can be recorded, have always had names. According to Judeo-Christian tradition, the earth was created in the year 3760 BC, which would mean we've been naming for over 6,000 years. These names were usually descriptive rather than just being a pleasing collection of sounds. Names started off as compounds, following Frankish names like Childeric, meaning battle powerful, to the ancient Norse, which had many compound names containing the name of the god Thor, like Thorgunna and Thorhalla, and so forth. And we're back. So before, or rather than getting into all of the details and the deep, content about names, like generation of name pools, the patronymics, etc. I want to target the Christian influence on naming practices because I think that it's really quite interesting. It's said that the Christianization of the Western world would have the single largest and most profound impact on the development of personal names, which I think is kind of crazy when we think about in today's culture how we can tend to downplay Christian influence, or we kind of add it to the rest of the big, religions like Hinduism and Islam. But not only is Christianity the number one religion in the world, but it also has had the biggest impact on how we name people, on how we have done names in the Western civilization, which, I think is one of the many reasons that, we really can't downplay Christianity and its impact on us and the impact it will continue to have, no matter how much we try. But that's another topic for another video, whole other topic. Back to names. I think that what is also kind of cool is that, names, back when they were being originated, according to academic materials, names were kind of always around. Ever since the beginning of oral history, right? We had names, and they were usually descriptive in nature. They weren't just a collection of nice sounding sounds. They usually were describing something or that thing, and they kind of, with the hope of the parents in a way as to what they want the kids to become, or they could actually just lead into, that kid, that child, because they were named that and they hear that name, they ended up becoming the namesake, or end up becoming what that name describes. If I take me, for example, I'm also a byproduct of this. My name, Aaron, in some definitions meaning to shine or to sing. I believe that, shining, I shine just a little bit from time to time, but singing, I do that all the time. So I'm literally living up to my name in that regard. But also leader is part of my name, and I believe I lead a little bit, but enough about me. Basically, we tend to live out what our names are. and then describe who we are. But with God, you know, who if those of us who ascribe to the Christian faith, we believe that names originated with God and his charge or command to Adam to name all the living creatures of the earth. And it even went as far as naming Eve, the first woman. You know, he actually named Eve as well. And so we believe that naming started with man, starting before man was starting with God. And God also, you know, calls us things in his word. He calls us things like fearfully and wonderfully made. He calls us mighty. He calls us loved, child. And so even in the Bible, we see God, you know, naming things, naming us in particular, throughout the scriptures, describing who we are. But I think it's very interesting about how God names us in comparison to how we name, is that while our names we're given here identify us with a label or a descriptive, what the Lord or who the Lord calls us identifies us with a purpose. And so if you think about, you know, Aaron, you know, and what the name means, you know, having, you know, Egyptian origin and all type of stuff, it can describe me, it can describe, you know, what I may do or who I may become. But when God says fearfully and wonderfully made, when God says mighty through God, when God says that I am the head and not the tail, above and not beneath, he is giving me purpose. He is telling me who in him I am. And so I think that that's different than the names we get here. They can describe something, but God's names give us purpose. And so I think that's really interesting when you think about names, because if we really do, you know, tend to walk out who we're called or what we're called, what if we dwelt less on what the world or people or even what our parents have called us and leaned into who God says we are? You know, all the scriptures talking about how we are his children, how we are the delight of his eye, how we are, like I said before, head and not the tail, above and not beneath, you know, his sheep. All these things, we kind of leaned into those things that he calls us, loved. How different would our walks be? Like, how different would we walk through life knowing that that is who we are, walking that purpose out? I just think it would change our perspective so much so that we would be able to see us walking out what he has called us. And that, I believe, is powerful. And so I just want to leave us with that today. I thought that was really interesting and encouraging to me to know that, you know, while we may have names here that don't really describe us, or names that we don't want to describe us, or even if we feel like our names that we have right now don't really describe us like we think they should or like we want them to, we have a God who has already, look, the Bible says, before we were born in our mother's womb, he knew us, right? Now, not only did he form us, but he knew us. And so he, more than likely, we don't know, he more than likely had a name for us before we came here. And that name may be the name that he calls us when we return to him. So, bottom line, he knew us before our parents knew us. And so what he calls us, more than likely, is who we are. More than likely is who we're purposed to be before the world tried to shift and change who we were and our perspective on what we were. God already gave us an identifier. And I think who and what we identify with is going to lead into how we walk our daily life. So that's all I have for today. I hope that this encouraged you. I hope that this made you think a little bit about your own name and about how maybe you can shift your perspective a little bit and dwell more in the word and see what God calls you. And so maybe you can walk a little differently, walk a little more confidently, because knowing that God has already named you beautiful and wonderful things in his word, and you can actually walk these things out. if we trust in him and if we believe that his word is true. So that's the video. If you like this kind of stuff and you have some other topics you want me to go into, please subscribe. Please like the video if you liked what I was talking about here a little bit. But until next time, peace and deuces.